Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's CMS Wire webinar titled How Low Code Can End the Application Struggle Between Business and IT. My name is Alec. I'm the media and events producer here at CMS Wire, and my role is pretty minimal today. I'm just going to bring you all in and let you know how to use a couple of the tools at your disposal, and then I'll be passing things off to the stars of the show here briefly. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Here's a really loose agenda. I always say, please don't hold me to these. I don't know why I even leave this slide in here because these times can vary depending on how conversation is flowing. So again, don't hold us to these exact numbers, but at any point during today's presentation, you could submit a question for the presenters. Just click on the Ask a Question tab. It's right below my webcam right now. Type your question in there, click Submit. We'll be keeping track of those here in the background, and we will save them for a Q&A session towards the end of the presentation today. If it's a technical question, I'll have an answer for you, and I'll help you work through those technical issues should they arise by working with you in that Q&A box as well. You can chat with your fellow attendees in the audience chat. That tab is also below our webcams right now. Just let us know where you're joining from, chat about the content. Get in there and get engaged, meet some fellow attendees. So here's a little bit about CMS Wire. If you were here, you probably know about us, but if you don't, if you're new, we were founded in 2003. We cover three primary topic areas: the digital customer experience, the digital workplace, and information management. You can find out more about us at cmswire.com. We also have a sister website called rework.co dealing with all things digital workplace. So check that out again at rework.co. All right, I want to thank Kissflow. Kissflow is the sponsor of today's event. It's been a pleasure working with them as we prepared for this over the course of the past few months. Kissflow is a leading SaaS company offering pioneering low-code and no-code work management solutions used by organizations in over 160 countries. Wow. Kissflow low-code brings business and IT leaders together to digitize business operations. It enables business teams to build apps with a simple drag and drop. From customizing pages to automating workflows, they can work together with IT teams and build applications in one powerful, easy to use, and thoughtfully designed platform. So again, I want to thank Kissflow for the support and sponsoring today's event. I know we have a lot of content lined up for you. So without any further delay, I'm going to pass things over to Neil Miller, the Director of Digital Workplace at Kissflow, to kind of take us along this journey and moderate today's discussion. So Neil, take it away.
Thanks, Alec. It's great to be here. As Alex said, my name is Neil Miller. I am the host of the Digital Workplace, where we talk about how to rebuild work for the digital age. There's a lot that needs to be changed and a lot of new approaches that we need to have before we can get to the place where we want to be. So at the Digital Workplace is a place where we have those conversations. We do a lot of podcasts and articles, but events and moderating these discussions is something I get passionate about and I get excited about. Today's topic represents one of probably the most exciting things that's happening in digital workplaces, because we're all needing more and more technology. Businesses all around need more tools, they need more applications, they need more support for those, and they need them to be customized, and they need them soon. Yet at the same time, IT leaders know IT is overburdened, there's a lot riding on them right now, and just asking them, hey, go out and hire a bunch of new developers is definitely in today's market not as easy as it sounds. So today's topic is really important. It represents one of the core issues and one of the core opportunities that comes up in digital workplaces all around. So I'm really excited about this today. We have two great speakers that are going to be here that I'm going to be helping out with this conversation. First, we have Suresh Sambandam. He is the founder and CEO of Kissflow. So we'll get to meet Suresh in a second. And we also have Justin Nelson, who's the Senior Director of IT and Strategy at Etnyre. Hey, guys, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome, Neil. Thanks for having me on this session. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's fantastic to be here. We got a lot of ground to cover. I don't know how familiar everyone in the audience is with the idea of low code. You can kind of put in some of your thoughts in the chat, whether or not you're already in the middle of it, you haven't heard the term before, or you're somewhere in between. But first, let me turn it over to Suresh to kind of give an introduction of himself and the journey with Kissflow.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Neil, and thanks, Justin. So Kissflow is our brand. We have multiple products. We have customers in 160 countries, more than 10,000 customers and more than 1 million users. These are all the places where we have customers. These are some of the big brands that use our software across the world. We really have some very proud brands. Today, we have Etnyre, who's going to be our customer. Justin is going to speak representing Etnyre, and he's a customer of Kissflow as well. I'll probably leave it here. From there, probably answer questions when Noel is ready to ask me.
Yeah, sure. We'll get deeper into it. Justin, why don't you introduce yourself and your company?
Sure. I'm Justin Nelson. As indicated, I'm the Senior Director of IT and Strategy for Etnyre International. Etnyre is a family-owned company, just over 120 years old, based out of the Midwest. We've got 5 facilities throughout the U.S., across 4 different states. We have 3 OEM brands of industrial heavy equipment that we manufacture primarily in the road building, road maintenance, resurfacing industry. And we also have a specialty metal fabrication business that we also run across the United States with dealerships across the world in over 30 countries. Our relationship with Kissflow, we've been a customer of Kissflow for about a year. I will say that, when I came into this role at Etnyre about a year and a half ago, one of the significant gaps that I found right away was that we didn't have strong systems of process discipline or process governance around, what were very manual workflows. So we were looking for a quick solution, a quick way to start to build that without a ton, having to throw a ton of IT development resources, or you have to buy a bunch of individual applications that would satisfy very narrow needs. So this was a great fit for us because we were able to take some of those things that, that required, again, that governance, that discipline, and being able to plug those in very quickly. But it also got us headed down this path where we start to deviate. My background, I started in IT as a web developer. And so my background was very much, bring me your business problem and let me write some software to solve it. And this was allowed us to kind of deviate from that model a little bit and start to empower the business. And that's, I think we'll talk more about that today, but that's exactly what this has been, is for us to say, okay, take your problem and a basic understanding of, how you might want to solve it. And I'm going to give you a drag and drop sort of platform that allows you to solve this problem yourself, and in so doing, kind of teach you to fish. So it's been a great experience for us so far. It definitely has paid dividends in terms of, shining a brighter light on what we're doing and maybe kind of where we need to go next in terms of where that goes.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I'm excited to get into this a little bit deeper. Let's start off our discussion. We can kind of move away from the slides and just have a discussion here between the 3 of us. Justin, let's start with you. Just set the scene for us by describing the current IT landscape. What do you feel like are the top challenges that face IT leaders today as opposed to 5-10 years ago? Yeah, so I'll say this without trying to sound too cliche, but in one word, it's evolving. And it's evolving pretty significantly because what I'm seeing, at least in my corner of the world, is a pretty significant shift. A generation of people who didn't grow up with technology are starting to retire, and they're being replaced by people who have, had it as far back as they can remember. So their needs, their expectations, their abilities, whether they themselves are IT professionals or not, are very different. And so it's shifting the whole landscape toward this model where technology is a tool more than it is a discipline. And then we've been saying these things for years, but it's really starting to happen where IT doesn't just happen in the IT department. Yeah, I love that phrase, tech is a tool, not a discipline. And it's something that I feel like every business leader has to have some competency around, for sure. Suresh, why don't you jump in? Share your own experience, kind of your background between IT and business teams. Why is this kind of a passion for you?
Yeah, it goes back deep into the background I come from. So when we started our company, a bunch of us were working in the rule engine space. Okay, and our idea was to see how to take the rules-based computing to users who don't know programming, so that they can write business rules and be able to build applications, right? And that's really the root of where Kissflow started. We used to call that democratizing business application development. So, and that's really the fundamental purpose and vision for why we formed Kissflow as a company. And we had gone through our own struggles in the first 5-7 years, where people haven't been really able to get hooked up to this idea of no code, low code development, right? And only in the last 5-7 years, the paradigm of low code and no code development has taken roots, and finally we are seeing tremendous interest and excitement in the space. In the last but we have been on this journey for more than 10-15 years. In this journey, the last 7-8 years, we have actually helped thousands of companies adopt our low code, no code paradigm and build enormous number of applications to automate their businesses within their companies. So that's really what our passion is, essentially democratizing application development, so that business users are empowered to build this application because they are closer to the problem, and enterprise IT can move to much higher roles, building very sophisticated applications, very complex applications, and managing and administering this whole low-code, no-code space. That's really the paradigm which Kissflow, propagates, right? So that's where we are coming from, and that's what excites us, and that's what makes us passionate about this.
Yeah, it's like you got into it probably at an era when people were saying, like, why would you need to democratize IT? Like, these business users don't know how to do anything with it. But we're seeing that shift, and that's kind of what Justin is saying as well. It seemed like the core issue around low code and no code tools is who's building these apps, who's making the applications, and there seems to be a greater focus.
Actually, Justin, I think Justin actually said it nicely. IT should not be done just in the IT department, right? So that's I think he said it in a very powerful way. So that's where we are heading. So meaning, like when Excel was there 25-30 years ago, see the way businesses used it, right? And that's really the inspiration. And we are going to see a similar explosion that's going to happen with low code, no code.
Yeah. Justin, tell us about specifically at your company, when you talk about who's building the apps, what types of apps are the business users actually making, and how much assistance are you giving from the IT support? Tell us about those stories.
Yeah, so we're maybe in kind of a good place to be doing this to begin with, because we are undergoing a pretty significant digital transformation and moving away from a software landscape that's pretty much remained unchanged for 20-25 years, from our ERP system to a lot of the other systems that sit alongside it and support it. And what's happened is, this modern workforce, they have a really strong appetite for data. How do I get some of that data that we've been collecting forever and start to do things with it, start making decisions using that data? So a lot of the applications we're looking at are kind of harnessing the power of that data, taking that, wherever it lives, adding some value to it, and then delivering it in a pretty specific way. So I think that aptly describes most of our application development needs currently, and probably for the foreseeable future. And again, the lines have blurred. This used to be done within the four walls of IT, and now I talk to people every day with English degrees who, tell me they took a course in C++. It happens. And it's happening all around us. People are used to, they know the capabilities. They know that, if I can do this on my smartphone with, something I use personally, I should be able to do similar functionality at work using the same kind of data. So the idea generation is just nuts right now. And the ability to be the steward of that as IT and say, okay, let me help you realize that. Let me give you some tools and let me give you some guidance, and then I'm going to set you free and go realize that. That's exactly what we're going through right now.
Yeah. Well, let me take a brief second here. We're going to put up a poll. Alec, if you can help us with this, asking about the pressing business needs that are driving organizations to look at their IT landscape. So check out that poll, give us an answer, and we'll revisit that in a second. While we do that, Alec, how much hand-holding are you doing with these business leaders as they're trying to build their own applications? Are they kind of giving you the idea and you're giving them the first draft and they're working with it, or are you totally hands-off? What level of involvement do you have?
I think was that more meant for Justin, possibly?
Yep, there you go, Justin. That's for you.
A lot of hand holding in the beginning, because there's a convergence of priorities. The very first question you asked me are what are some challenges that I see, and one of the things I didn't say but is always at the top of my mind is cybersecurity. You can't be in this field, no matter what role you have, without constantly thinking about that. And cybersecurity, or just risk management in general over data privacy is critical. So, my role, I used the word steward a few minutes ago. My role is to make sure that as the business is starting to use these tools to build software themselves, I'm still there kind of making sure that certain boxes are being checked. The data, there's integrity in the data, that the data is safe, that they're not improperly exposing data that shouldn't be. So it's very much a partnership, and I believe that it always will be. Suresh said that that the more complex the applications become, the more they start to move back into IT, and I absolutely agree with that. But even those very simple applications, still a very strong partnership between my group and the rest of the business, just to make sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. Again, we have a vast information landscape, so it's very easy for somebody to go grab the wrong data or make the wrong assumption about what it represents. And so my team is still there to provide that advice and that guidance.
Nice. Suresh, we've been talking about this idea of sophistication of apps and complexity that's out there. I know that's something you've probably dealt with a lot of people saying, okay, low code, no code, that's for really simple, easy applications. What's your take on that? Given all the customers you've had, where do the apps that people build on a platform like Kissflow fall?
Sure. I think this is a good time to introduce 3 terms. Okay. One is a term called citizen developers. The second one is a term which we call it, let's say, IT developers in enterprise IT. And then there is a third term that is the professional developers or product developers. More than professional, I would say product developers. Okay. Now, the no-code product paradigm is ideally meant for the citizen developers, where they don't have any coding skills, but they can simply manage only visual drag and drop and click a button here and there and quickly go something with live, right? And they can probably handle only simple applications. And then the second class is IT developers. They can handle more complex applications, but they need programming, a bit of a programming skills in addition to the no-code capability, which allows them to give high productivity with a visual drag and drop environment. But then they need a little bit more control to have, when somebody clicks on a button and they need to know like an on-click event and they want to write some code in there, write some logic in there and all of those things, right? And that sophistication, I don't think business users can handle that. And that's where the low code correctly fits in. And that category of applications is best developed by IT developers, and they're probably medium complex in application. And then sometimes enterprise IT also builds products, right? Like, not just applications, but solid products. They probably need to go back to like Java or Python or some formal programming language when you're building a product for consumption, just like Kissflow is building a product, right? Those kind of are very, very sophisticated applications. That's where more and more traditional development is going to fit in. Rest of the non-product based development, all internal applications, everything will fall into the low code, no code paradigm. And that's the future where we are heading. So I don't know whether this answers the question that you asked me.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say if you had to guess a percentage of applications, just in terms of number of applications that any organization would need, how many would be able to be developed on a low code, no code platform versus needing to be done by IT developers?
Sure, that's a very interesting one. So if you take a 2,000 member enterprise, right, they typically have 200 or so unique application which fits into the low code, no code, set, right? And at any point in time, and right now all of these applications are backlogged because the cost of developing this and the time it takes to develop this and the relative ROI for the time and the cost is quite high. And IT is probably going to say, you know what, which of these 200 you want now, right? Because, they have pressed for time and they have much more mission critical applications like ERP or supply chain that's running and they need to keep it live, right? So that's a huge number. And if you need to do those number of applications in a shorter amount of time with higher ROI and a very quick time to market, and most importantly, the ability to change them on an ongoing basis. And that's really where the no-code, low-code hits it on the nail, right? The problem is if you develop it once and go production and you're never going to touch it, then at least, it's fine. But then most of the simple applications keep evolving as they go, time goes along. And every time you go back to the traditional software development lifecycle, you're going to talk in terms of weeks or months. But here in a low-code, no-code paradigm, you just open the form or open the visual editor, make changes and click a button, push, and you go live. And that's really the numbers we're talking about, right? And typically 70% of all the backlogs that any IT team has fits into the low-code, no-code application.
Justin, I saw your head shaking a little bit. What part of that resonates with you? What's your response?
Yeah, I think the idea of that agility and that, that to use that same word that Suresh used earlier, that paradigm shift in the agility to move away from a traditional software development lifecycle and move towards something. And that's the experience we've had with the Kissflow no-code product so far that has really, kind of surprised people here is they'll come to me and say, hey, that workflow that they don't know it as a workflow, that program we built to, run our purchase requests through, we made a mistake. We forgot to consider this one fundamental, deviation in that flow. And it's got to start doing this going forward. And as they're talking, I'm in there clicking and dragging and dropping. I'm like, you know what, it's done. And they're like, no, I don't think you understand. We need that. And it's, that ability to be that agile with it and drag and drop, not only in a no code, but in a low code deployment is tremendous because it allows this to, again, shift closer to the business. They understand that, hey, that I don't have to go through this long planning phase of software where I start to carve things into stone that can never really be walked back, because by the time I bring this to the attention of the developers, they'll have moved on to this next project. and they'll never be able to go back to this. So I have to live with this now. And that paradigm shift is remarkable.
Yeah, that's amazing. Let's take a look at the survey that we ran earlier to see what the results are from this one. So Alec, if you can share that one. It looks like in terms of pressing business needs that driving organizations to relook at their IT landscape, top results here are reducing operational costs, migrating on-premise to the cloud. Also have some good responses to better visibility into what's happening. So that's really interesting too. Alec, let's go ahead and launch the second one so people can answer it while we're having more discussions about the most attractive reason for picking a low-code, no-code platform. So as you've been hearing about this, hopefully some things have, we've discussed some of the benefits that are there. Justin, let me come back to you. Suresh used the term we said ROI. IT has limited resources. There's only certain applications they can work on. So how does the ROI discussion come in, specifically if you're going to your team, your finance director, and saying, hey, I need this tool because it's going to enable us to do this. So speak about ROI from your perspective.
I guess, well, for us, this was a foregone conclusion that, we needed a solution, and we knew what the alternative looked like. It's hire a developer, outsource some development, kind of go through a pretty significant commitment of resources, whether they're in-house or not, to go do this very discrete thing, knowing full well that there is going to be a long line of similar projects that are sitting behind that. So for us, the approach of doing it this way and making an investment in a platform that allows us to take more of a DIY approach to this, whether it's at that no code level or a low code level, and kind of kill many birds with one stone, was sort of a no-brainer. Especially once we were able to see, just through some very simple demos brought to surface, okay, we didn't even know that was a gap. We didn't even realize that we needed the ability to do some of these other things. Now that we do, again, it was a story that pretty much told itself.
And how would you compare it then to, you have full development on one side, we'll put this low code, no code in the middle. And then on the other side, you have, go out and find point solutions for all these types of things. You need to go out and find a purchase order software off the shelf. Go find, your leave management request and all the different types of apps that someone would need. What makes that side of it unattractive to you?
Experience. To me, that's a nightmare. I come from a place where, trying to in manufacturing, and as is in many different industries, but in manufacturing in particular, the ERP system, that core business data is really critical. And the more degrees of separation you build between that core data and some of this other, these other interfaces, these other systems, the more complexity you start to build, the more difficult, the more challenging it becomes to use that information to do good things. So you don't really want to, in my humble opinion, try to solve your problems that way, because you're just layering complexity upon complexity, upon complexity going forward, and you're making decisions that are going to be more difficult to walk back and make some future digital transformation that much more, challenging to even think about.
Yeah. Suresh, you talked about the idea of citizen developers, IT developers. The term low code, as I've seen it in some of my analysis of the market, often means a development platform for IT developers that's a little bit easier, and perhaps they can bring in a business user to sit with them and walk them through that process a little bit. But what you guys are doing at Kissflow is a little bit of the opposite, where you start from the no-code platform and then now are adding on features that are still consistent with letting business users understand that. I find that to be a unique approach when you talk about the whole low-code platform. Why have you decided to move in that direction?
Okay. Why? Okay, fundamentally, what we need to look at is there is a huge digital transformation wave that's going on. Okay, and if you look at some numbers, that numbers are really stacking, glaring numbers, right? So according to IDC, there's going to be 500 million. Okay, I just wanted to restate that 500 million digital apps. Just to, just imagine that number. That's so scary, right? 500 million digital apps and services will be developed and deployed by 2023. Even forget about 2023, even by 2025, even by 2030, that's a big number, right? But because we didn't develop so many applications in the last 40 years. In the last 40 years, we haven't developed 400 million, 500 million applications. But we are going to develop the next 5 to 7 years, although in IDC saying 2023, I'm even giving 5 to 7 years. That's a staggering number of applications that needs to be developed, right? So which means that that's not just exponential, that is super duper exponential, expectation in terms of growth of applications, which means that unless there is a fundamental shift in the way we are building this, we can't crack this problem. Right? If you have to really achieve the digital transformation. So what is that fundamental shift? Is that what is happening between IT and business is that business possesses the domain knowledge. And developers are basically translating the domain knowledge into IT applications. Because as a developer myself, I don't have the domain knowledge. I don't know what is a purchase request and a purchase order or an invoice and what is a three-way match and what is a payment. I don't know that, right? But if I'm working in a procurement system, I know what's a purchase request. I know how is it different from a purchase order. I don't know that as an IT developer. Now, if there is a tool that can take advantage of this domain knowledge of the business user, and he can directly build this and then take the guidance of IT to make sure that the data is accessed properly, the security is taken care of, the access control is enforced, because that is still technical, right? And if we can bring both these people together in a single unified platform, then we can really achieve that 500 million applications digital transformation is quite possible. And that's really, and this is not IT versus business users. And that's the most important thing that we need to say. It is not either or, it is together. It is like people together need to work together because business has the domain knowledge, IT has the technical knowledge, right? And that's the approach that Kissflow has taken. So we have come from the no-code paradigm, and then we have added in the capability for IT to manage, administer, help business, so that together we can go after the digital transformation paradigm. That's really how Kissflow is approaching this.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Justin, in your experience, do you feel like your relationship with some of your business leaders has changed, improved, or in any way evolved?
Absolutely. And I think that really goes back and speaks to what I meant to the, in my first answer that I provided in terms of that evolving, is because absolutely. When I started as a developer, there was almost, I won't say it's more of a customer service model, like the DMV, if you will. And I guess what I mean by that is, as the developer, I had somebody else who was out there developing the spec, developing some sort of statement of work, understanding the business problem, and then handing that off to me. And I wasn't in a customer-facing role, so to speak. So I took everything from that person and I turned it into something else, and then I handed it back. And those are the lines that have blurred. And Suresh really nailed that. It's the idea of taking sort of that business analyst, that person who used to sit in between, and giving that person or that team the tools to actually go out and solve the problem themselves, because they're closer to the business. And in this shift, yeah, absolutely, my relationship with other leaders, other functional leaders throughout the business has absolutely changed, because the conversation itself has changed, because they now see themselves not only as a stakeholder, but as a partner. The expectation is they need to have some understanding of how you solve problems, business problems, with technology. That's not just for me to give them. They're expected to have some of that too. So that whole relationship changes, and it really is a partnership. It's absolutely a partnership.
Yeah. Actually, Neil, I would like to give an example. Imagine if today IT has to go and make Excel sheets and give it to business. It is such a boring task. Nobody would want to do that, right? And that is the kind of maturity we are going towards the IT landscape. Simple applications, business IT leaders like Justin are enabling their businesses to do that. And they are basically providing the oversight to be able to help them achieve their goals. And that Excel analogy is really the one that strikes me so hard, because today it will be so unproductive for some technical people to build Excel and give it to business, right? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And essentially, like, there was a day when the extent of the technology you gave to a business leader was Excel, PowerPoint, Word, and email, and that was it. And then now today, you need to equip them with these more powerful tools to be able to do more with it.
Yeah,
let's close out this section of the talk, coming back to Justin, just talking about talent. Obviously, in the IT space, finding good developers is difficult. Retaining them is difficult. And in today's market, even more so. So tell us how you feel like a tool like a low-code tool can impact the talent impact into your business.
Okay. I think for my business, for my type of role in my industry, it's very helpful for a couple of reasons. First of all, I have to be very agile. My team has to be very agile. We have to do a million different things, and I have to be able to do it with a relatively small team. So what that means is I have people who each wear several different hats. And that's already challenging. When you go back to the way Suresh described, whereas with that middle tier of developers who are developing business applications, typically within the business, because I was one at one time, they don't always like to wear those other hats. They're kind of artisans, if you will. They like to, live inside the code. They take a lot of pride in that. And you tell them they got to go reset some passwords or clear a paper jam or install some Cat 6 cable, and sometimes they see that as beneath them. So it's hard for me where I'm at and where I sit to have a person that, but then you combine that with the fact that I think incoming IT professionals, developers, they themselves don't want to be pigeonholed inside a particular programming language or a methodology the way that they used to accept that, because they understand that everything is changing and it's evolving faster, kind of a la Moore's law. So what I learned today and what I start doing today is probably not even going to exist in a few years. So I don't want to commit myself to, unless I'm going to go do product development on that far tier, maybe that's fine. But if I'm going to do this kind of development, I don't want to commit myself to this really steep learning curve to do all of that only to have the rug pulled out from my feet later. So I want to be agile. I want to be a developer because I have critical thinking skills. I have problem solving is just a part of who I am, and I like to do this. But I don't want to be super dependent on one particular code base in order to do that. So I think for me, attracting that person that falls within that sweet spot for me is a lot easier if I can remove that dependency and I can say, okay, you don't have to know that language. You just have to have the other requirements to be an effective developer. And I'll give you something that is a pretty robust, universal tool to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a wonderful thing to be able to offer to people coming into such a, you said it, I mean, it's an evolving space. And if they get stuck into one thing right away, it's going to be really difficult to come out. Well, great. Let's go back and, Alec, if we can show the results of our second survey that was out there, the most attractive reasons for picking a low-code, no-code platform. Yeah, definitely reducing cost of development is a big one. Accelerating digital transformation we talked about, democratizing app development. It's hard maybe even to pick up some of those. Speed of development obviously is a big one that's there. So all these things I think we've covered and would definitely be a part of the discussion that's there. Let's transition our time to getting some questions in from the audience. So we've got a lot of them have come in. I'm going to start with some of these. So Gary has asked this question. What are some of the difficulties using low code instead of traditional hand-coded computer programming? Justin, I know that you've been using mostly the no code platform, but have you guys run into any issues there so far?
I mean, there's a hump you have to get over as a citizen developer, and that is just to understand in general at a higher level, how does software development work? How does data flow through this mechanism? And what are just some of the general constructs that allow it to move and stop and go different directions and do things along the way? And so that really is the challenge, is you almost have to have sort of a boot camp for your business partners to say, okay, here's your software development, your no code software development 101. Here's the way to look at a problem and a solution. And getting them over that hump is probably, from a no-code perspective, the biggest challenge we've seen so far.
Yep. Suresh, with some of the other customers and clients, what do you feel like, and specifically thinking about the low-code, if somebody's coming, an IT developer is coming in, what may be some of the challenges they face?
Sure. I think there is one thing that people have to keep in mind. With pure no code only, there may be some limitations in terms of UI customization flexibilities, right? So that is one challenge that they will probably face. When combined with low code, that UI customization flexibility is to a large extent reduced. So if you have a low code and a no code combination, you probably have a best of both worlds, right? So you will have the ability of productivity, and also you have the flexibility of getting to a customized user interface experience. But you can't get that ultimate, control, fine-grained control in terms of what you want to develop in the front end, like how you developed in a Python or a Java programming language, right? Or a front end, or right? So that is not possible. But then that is only 5%. You will be able to achieve 95% of what you are able to do, 95% of what you're able to do with the low code, no code combination. And that is more than good enough for many of the applications, especially the 70-80% of the applications that's in the backlog. So that's really what I wanted to say. So it is not like you can do everything. There is a 5% of the things you may not be able to do, but that you should probably be able to live with that.
Nice. All right. Shiva has asked a question about shadow IT. He says, low code and no code. While it promotes more development in an organization, it could also, if it's not governed well, produce even more shadow IT. And kind of like what we were talking about earlier, Justin was saying that it becomes very important for him to be able to interact with that. So Suresh, why don't you go first? What's the issue of shadow IT with low code?
I think as long as IT evolution happens, the term shadow IT will never die, I guess. I don't know. I want to remind all of us here, and including the audience, I don't know how many of you know PC was a shadow IT product, right? The personal computers that we are all used today, the desktops and the laptops, it was actually a shadow IT product, because at the time IT was mainframe and mini was inside the big rooms, right? And when PC was invented, and it had to be reached the user. So basically, that's how it all started. And then came Office and Excel tools, and then came Salesforce. That was a shadow IT tool as well, right? And today we know Salesforce is actually mainstream IT platform in the enterprise IT, right? So that's really what is going to happen. There's going to be a little bit of chaos in the beginning, and then everything will settle down, just like how things have happened. The history has shown us that way, right? But this is a radical new paradigm, and we all need to adapt that. Luckily, in the low-code, no-code space, when it came to us in the cloud computing paradigm. So the most earlier version of this democratization actually happened in Lotus Notes. If you really look at Lotus Notes, that was the precursor for all the low-code, no-code paradigm, right? But then that happened in the client-server paradigm, and those applications were all loosely hanging around here and there, and there's no central place. There is no way to audit. There's no way to find out usage metrics. There's no way to find out who's the owner, who is using it, where is the data. All those issues were there. Luckily for us, the low-code, no-code paradigm is happening on top of the cloud computing paradigm, which means that everything is centralized, everything is located in a single place, the database is central, everybody is accessing through browser, nothing is left in the users' desktops or laptops, meaning we are in a much, much better shape, and I don't see a major issue of shadow IT cropping up with low-code, no-code because of it being coupled with the cloud computing paradigm.
Nice. Justin, is shadow IT something you're worried about, or is just you feel like it's just going to be there and you'll deal with it as it comes?
Both. So I'll say that over the years, I remember a time when shadow IT was something that, or at least in the places that I've worked and the roles I've been in, it was something you would aggressively seek out almost with extreme prejudice. Like you've got to get rid of this because you want there to be a single source of truth. You want there to, you want to be the keeper of all of this. My concern going forward is that we need to remove, I guess, the stigma and say that and really embrace this concept of shadow IT, but make sure that we don't take a hands-off approach to this idea of, citizen development or low-code development on the business side. There may be a temptation in business to see this as a cost avoidance move and say, well, now I don't need to have as much internal IT resources because we're going to empower, this citizen development effort, or this, I can get lower skilled IT developers in here to do low code development, and maybe I can avoid some of the cost of the traditional, software development system. And I think that it's all going to be about how people like myself message this to the business and say, well, that's not entirely true, because this is all about a partnership. This is all about building the 500 million applications that Suresh was talking about. We're enabling that. We're not, taking that away from one group, and it's all about putting it closer to where the value is within the business. And IT still has to be a strong partner in that to embrace, again, shadow IT and make sure that we're applying a layer of governance that wouldn't otherwise be there. If you just take a hands-off approach and say, okay, I'm just going to turn software development over to my functional lines of business and to a handful of, low-code developers and just let them go crazy with it.
Yeah. Definitely need a good mix of those two for sure. Anupam has a question about the time it takes to develop an app. So maybe, Justin, if you could start just with some of the applications you guys have built on Kissflow, roughly how long did it take those things to come about?
What we've found with our no-code applications is it takes more time to fully document the process than it does to actually develop the application. And that's not hyperbole. That's fact. In one case, it took us over a month just to develop and fully flesh out all the different directions that a process might need to go, and what are some of the ways we might need to escalate things or add additional notifications or have it, go back to the beginning. And so figuring all of that out, took us over a month. Developing the application took us, I'll say a day, but I'm sure it wasn't even a day. It was probably a couple of hours.
Yeah. Suresh, is that pretty consistent with what you see from other customers?
Yeah, and I'm so happy to hear that from Justin. So it's like one of those times when your vision comes true, right? Actually, when we go into sales calls, we basically say, what's your requirement? And then we sort of build this application online and show it to them in half an hour. And that sounds like too good to be true, right? And I used to tell them in early days during the sales calls, right? It takes more time for you to spec out what you have in your mind as your application than actually to develop that in Kissflow, because developing in Kissflow is the easy part now, right? It's getting the clarity and drawing the flow charts and making those forms and the fields and what fields you want to capture and all of that. Thinking through that is really more time consuming now, and actually developing it is very, very consistent actually. So previously what happens is your requirement specification and time will be like 20%, and development, testing and go live will be 80%. Now the development and testing and go live is like 20%. And the requirements specification is 80%. So that is the shift in paradigm that the no-code, low-code tools have brought in actually.
Wow, that's great. Last question we'll take here comes from Michael. He says, how do you suggest businesses that are trying to switch away from Java-based applications convince key stakeholders that the low-code applications can work just as well? Justin, do you feel like this has been a challenge for you, or do you have any advice to give to people?
I guess I'm trying to think through exactly how we did that very thing here. For us, it was going out and finding somebody in our organization, actually, and this was on the low code side, but we found somebody in part of our engineering organization who had a little bit of a background on the software side too, and who I knew was very much an idea generator. And I said, well, look, as a part of a subscription we have in something else already, there's some ability to do some low code development. Why don't you and I sit through a quick workshop on what that might look like, and let's just develop some proof of concept. Just take some idea that's bouncing around in your head, and let's see how close we can get that to the finish line without throwing a bunch of time at it. And so we did that. And I don't remember exactly what that application was. I think it had to do with, some statistical analysis around, post-delivery inspection of a manufactured component, something along those lines. And did that pretty quickly. And that proof of concept then was very telling, because, if we were able to do that just in a day, just the two of us, what other things could we do going forward? And so, I haven't tackled the thought of taking a large existing complex, Java-based system and refactoring that into a low-code environment. I'm not ready to make that leap just yet. For me, it's all about developing these new applications. So I think that's probably about as good of an answer as I can give. But it was very much around just, let's dip our toes in the water. Let's build something really quickly, see just how easy this is and how much value it can give us back. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
I think one short answer is, I would say, meaning just to follow through what Justin was saying, the easier thing is most of these low-code platforms, including Kissflow, have a trial for you. You can quickly build a quick application in a week or so, and probably they will help the vendors, including Kissflow, right? So I'm not just promoting Kissflow. Most of them will be helping you to build this application along with them for a week, and then show it to an internal management. that should be the most easiest way. And you can see it for yourself. Hey, it took a week for us to develop this functionality. It would otherwise taken probably 3 months. 3 months to 6 months, right? And that's the ROI straight there. And most importantly, enterprise IT don't have to compete for the same kind of talent, right? If you're hiring Java talent and Python talent, and the next opportunity that they'll go is try to work for a Microsoft or a Google, right? So that's what they really want to go with. And if you keep losing, you keep hiring these people, it becomes a training ground. Come there and get some experience, and then they keep switching. And instead of getting the work done. And that's really where this whole thing is going to help the enterprise ID. There is a huge ROI justification that can be easily made.
Yeah. Great. Well, Suresh and Justin, I really appreciate both of you coming on and leading us through this discussion. Thanks to everyone for giving your questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but this is obviously a really exciting topic with a lot of people that have a lot of things to say. Any final words from either of you as we close out? Suresh, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's been an amazing experience with you, Neil and Justin, participating in this conference. And the one thought that I would like to leave all the audience is the no-code, low-code paradigm is basically a game changer, and it's no longer an option, especially post-COVID. The digital transformation has become. People who have been running application outside of the cloud have started thinking, you know what, it's better if at all these applications were online and been running on the cloud, people would have worked from home and have been much more productive. And the whole world is gearing up to this new reality, right? And hence, jump onto this bandwagon now and don't delay it, and start trials with some of the vendors and experience yourself and get to know the low-code, no-code paradigm. That's all I would say.
Great, Justin.
Yeah, I don't really have much, Neil. I appreciate having the opportunity to be a part of this. I guess my final thought would just be, 15 years ago, me would have been nervous hearing some of this because my mind would have gone to like, immediately, am I myself becoming obsolete? And I think that for technology leaders like myself, there may be this temptation to just try to hold on with a death grip to the status quo, just because, change introduces that fear. But this really is, we've seen significant change, involuntary change over the last 18 months into how our world works, whether it's the hybrid workplace or what does it mean to attract talent today and retain talent today that we weren't even thinking about 18 months ago. So change is here whether we wanted it or not. And now it's really about embracing that and looking further ahead. And I think that tools like this we're going to see that as the enablement of a lot of that. So again, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.
Yeah, thank you both for being here. I've really enjoyed a lot and learned a lot in this process. Alec, over to you.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, I just kind of want to echo those statements, thanking you all for taking the time to be here and presenting to our audience. We had a ton of questions come through. And that's a testament to the content and discussion in today's webinar. So I really appreciate that. And thanks again to Kissflow once more for sponsoring today's event. It's really been a pleasure working with the team over there. We've been working on this with them for a while. So we appreciate their support here at CMS Wire. You can find out more about them at kissflow.com. So thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time. This webinar was recorded. You'll receive a link to that recording in a follow-up email within the next couple of days. So thanks again. Have a great day, and we'll see you on the next webinar.